Hey everyone! Great to be back with you all again, and a happy Halloween to you! Throughout my previous videos, I've made it no secret that MediEvil for the PS1 has always and continues to be one of my favorite spooky-themed games to ever exist, even despite its flaws. So, you can imagine my excitement when I first heard that Sony was going to release a remake of the original game for the PlayStation 4. Unlike MediEvil Resurrection for the PSP, this title would attempt to be more faithful to the PS1 original, while still trying to welcome in a newer generation of gamers. In the year of 2019, did it manage to sink the landing? And how does it fare today, a full 6 years later? Get those cobwebs out of your eyes, and we'll see just how well the MediEvil remake for the PS4 turned out. Ooh. Developed by Other Ocean Emeryville, published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, and released on October 25th of 2019, MediEvil is a remake of the 1998 PS1 classic of the same name. Like the original, it's a 3D platformer and hack-and-slash game, starring our favorite jawless skeleton, Sir Daniel Fortescue. In celebration of the game's 20th anniversary, Sony decided to bring this franchise back from the dead.
It has risen again!
For those unfamiliar, I'll give you a quick rundown of the story. A legend is told that in the land of Gallowmere, year 1286, an evil sorcerer named Zarek attempted to betray Gallomere's king and take over the land with an army of undead soldiers. It was said that a brave warrior named Sir Daniel Fortescue led the king's army to victory in the Battle of Gallowmere, and even managed to kill Zarek himself. This was, of course, the furthest thing from the truth. Here's what really happened. Sir Daniel Fortescue was a teller of tall tales, who would impress the king and others with his charming personality. The king would go on to knight him during a time of peace, before Zarek began his rebellion. And Dan? Well, he was immediately killed by one of the first arrows shot during the very first charge. To save the kingdom from embarrassment, the king declared Dan to be a hero instead, creating a false account of their history, with the truth known only by a select few people. And now, we flash forward to present day, where Zarek has returned to bring back his undead army and rule over Gallowmere once more. In the process of casting his spell to revive the dead, Daniel also gets revived, allowing him one final chance to become a true hero and save Gallowmere from Zarek's clutches once and for all. Just like the original game, the MediEvil Remake is a 3D hack-and-slash platformer with a strong focus on action and adventure. The general look, sound, and atmosphere is reminiscent of the qualities found in Tim Burton-like movies and soundtracks from artists and composers such as Danny Elfman. Daniel pulls in a wide arsenal of weapon types, relics, keys, and other items to help him on his journey. Sir Dan also encounters all kinds of environments, including graveyards, pumpkin patches, a mausoleum, crystal caves, floating pirate ships, and more. This, of course, makes it the perfect fit for the Halloween season. There are two control methods you can choose from, with the classic setup being more like the original games. The modern controls to the game are still similar to the original, with a few enhancements. Dan moves around with the left analog stick, moves the camera when not in a fixed camera area with the right stick, uses a strong strike of a weapon with square, a secondary or charged version of the strike with circle, jump with X, and triangle to now switch between two equipped weapons for fast switching. This was first implemented in MediEvil 2, and thankfully made a comeback here. Blocking is now done with R1 and held down when running to dash, after you unlock the ability. L1 allows you to switch between targets when you have more than one surrounding you. R2 allows you to strafe from left to right for easier counterattacks, and hitting L2 changes the camera to an over-the-shoulder view, similar to what we see in a lot of modern games today. While I personally prefer the original view, I was impressed by the fact that the developers were able to pull this off. The touchpad opens up your inventory for switching between other weapons or bringing out key items to progress in the game. There's also a target reticle that is constantly shown in front of Dan, when it used to only display when pulling out ranged weapons. One of the biggest complaints that fans of the original had toward it, including myself, was the game's camera. While it did allow you to rotate it and adjust your view, it would often get stuck, with little or no way to adjust it. leading to a lot of pointless falls and hits from enemies out of view. It was known to auto-adjust in a lot of places, but not others, leading to some serious inconsistencies. Some of the fixed camera angles also added to the confusion, despite some of them contributing to the game's cinematic look. The best word I could think of to describe it would be janky. Here, the camera is completely adjusted, with the ability to fully rotate it at all times. While it is still far from what I'd call perfect, in fact some may end up still preferring the original, it is, at least to me, a huge improvement, and I'm happy I can finally move it around without feeling like it's going to become stuck or jittery every few seconds. Stages like the Ghost Ship, which were previously known for being a fixed camera nightmare, are more than manageable here, and it is greatly appreciated. Although this game's development team did not involve original director Chris Sorrell or original designer Jason Wilson, Other Ocean Emeryville was very serious about remaining faithful to the original game, while taking advantage of Unreal Engine 4's abilities. They would only make small changes in places deemed necessary, or in places where an idea had been put in place from the original, but was unable to be implemented the first time around. For example, in the stage The Pumpkin Serpent, you face off with a giant pumpkin boss called the Pumpkin King. While the boss looked amazing, there really wasn't much to the fight other than standing around and shooting or slashing at it until it went down. As it turned out, the game's source code had a much bigger plan in mind. In this version of the fight, after breaking all of the pods to unlock it, Dan has to continually move while taking shots or hits at the pumpkin, or get hit by one of its many slashes or projectiles. After taking out its health the first time around, another barrier goes up around it, while Dan has to go find and take down more pods that begin to restore. After doing this, the boss enters a second phase, where Dan also gets attacked by more enemy pumpkins alongside the Pumpkin King's attacks. This goes on for a full 3 phases, making the fight feel much more complete and definitive, with the Pumpkin King slowly degrading after each initial phase. As a longtime fan, I was very surprised to learn about and experience this change. To further add to the faithfulness of the original game, composers Andrew Barnabas and Paul Arnold returned once more to compose the new game's soundtrack, with help from the Prague Symphony Orchestra, making this the second time, after MediEvil Resurrection, that the game would have a full symphony orchestra to back it up. Some tracks were remastered from Resurrection, while others were new orchestral arrangements of the tracks from the original game, and even some new compositions went with it. The comparisons to the work of Danny Elfman are clear as day here, and I mean that in the best of ways. The voice work itself is also interesting to talk about here. You might have expected most of the original cast to come back and re-record the voices or something similar. Instead, they actually used the exact same voice clips from the original in this remake, minus some additional narrations and texts read by Lonnie Manila. I can't say I'm mad about this either, as I really loved the original voices and dialogue of the original. I guess if it ain't broke, right?
We hopes it does well.
One other form of keeping faithful to the original game was the Hall of Heroes. If the player collected the souls of enough defeated characters and found the stage's hidden chalice, they could enter the Hall of Heroes, where Dan would encounter the statue of a fallen warrior and obtain a new weapon or item. In the original, these statues would move a bit and talk to Dan exactly as they were. Some saw this as a limitation, while others, like myself, thought this added a funny level of personality and imagination to each of these characters. In MediEvil Resurrection, the developers would have these characters come completely to life in full colors and motion, and while I understood this approach, I felt like this took away from some of the original's charm. I was very happy to see that the remake's developers went back to the old style, as it's just one of the many things that made MediEvil exactly what it was. The things that made the original game stand out at the time of its creation, and why I believe it still deserves some recognition even to this day, were the varied environments with each new stage, the enemy variety the game would throw at you, the amazing music to complement the spooky and slightly silly atmosphere, and the sheer bravery of Sir Dan, originally shown as a coward and a failure, stepping up to become the hero he was always portrayed to be in Gallowmere's history. It was all just so unique and endearing at the time, and still is to this day. But would I recommend this remake to new players now? That's a bit of a tough call. Yes, Dan, I'll explain. As I said earlier, the developers went through great lengths to stay true to the original, but it's not all feasting, singing, and arm wrestling. On top of staying faithful to the original scripts, level design, and even glitches, like the inconsistent sword swings in the original, they also decided to keep the game's combat mostly the same. Aside from the target reticle now appearing at all times instead of just when equipping ranged weapons, some strafe motions, and the over-the-shoulder view, everything about the gameplay is almost exactly the same, with a couple of very small differences here and there. For those who were hoping for a more modernized fight engine, this may come as a bit of a shock and wind up disappointing a lot of people. Even I was among the many who thought that an updated combat system would work wonders for this title, and help shine it in a new light for modern gamers. While I certainly didn't mind going back to what I was used to, as I've played the original countless times, I can't deny that this makes it a tougher sell to those who were already unfamiliar with the original. Enemy encounters also felt a little different, as the enemy AI seemed to come at you a little faster than it used to in the original. I found myself having to utilize the shield and dodges far more often than I ever had to in the original. I don't mind this, but I have a feeling it will cause others to have a much harder time getting through it. Another factor that may bother some new players is that there's no type of checkpoint system in the stages. I don't personally think this is too big of a deal, as most levels can be beaten in a relatively short amount of time if you know what you're doing, and life bottles are essentially the game's form of extra lives, so to speak. But I'll also admit that the feeling of going through a stage, getting to the end of a boss fight, and losing all of your health right before, only to have to begin the entire stage again, is not a fun time. You may be wondering if there were any new levels or extra content that was not in the original. While it's not as big as any new stages, there is at least a few more things to do here. Near the end of the game, after opening up one of the books in Zarek's lair, you unlock a set of missions called the Lost Souls. It requires you to revisit each stage and complete different objectives throughout the stages to set the souls free. It's nothing extraordinary, but it does give you more to do. The other addition is the Book of Gallowmere. This is a book that compiles all of the characters and enemies that you come across. This is also a great way to showcase just how vast the enemy variety truly is, as this is not a small set of characters by any means. And what does completing all of this get you? Well, if you go to the main menu after finishing the Lost Souls missions, you'll see a new entry on the game's main menu titled Old Game. Yep, you guessed it. Selecting this will allow you to play the original PS1 game in its entirety. On top of that being a great bonus to throw in, as I always enjoy comparing remakes to their original versions, this is also important from a historic standpoint. Including the original game would mark Sony's first instance of having PS1 emulation run off of the PS4 through additional software. Sony would later go on to support PS1 emulation for PS4 and PS5 officially in 2022. Seeing this game serve as something of a prototype to that here was pretty cool. I suppose discussing this game also opens up the question of how far developers should go when remaking a title, and the difficulty that comes with each decision made. Do you try to remain completely faithful to the original and alienate more potential new players? Gravitate toward making something that caters more to newcomers and alienate the fans of the original game? The obvious answer is, of course, to find some type of middle ground that can appeal to the most people possible, but the solution to doing so is anything but. In this case, I can see the developers went to great lengths to stay faithful to the original, and as a longtime fan of it, there's no doubt that they succeeded. Even with its flaws and outdated gameplay, MediEvil still remains one of my favorite PS1 titles to this very day. With that said, I know full well that the changes made to this new remake won't be enough for others to properly enjoy it. The difficulty comes from an era when action and platformers were still on the more unforgiving side, and the lack of any options to help ease new players into this now will make that more glaring than ever. If you think you can work with that, then I believe you'll experience one of the greatest mixes of gothic atmosphere and wackiness this side of Scarecrow Fields, with a soundtrack that will have you humming the tunes long after you've turned it off. As a longtime fan, I was absolutely thrilled with how faithful this remake was to the original, as it captured more of the spooky atmosphere and gothic look that made it such a treasured game on the PS1, without making all of the concessions that MediEvil Resurrection first did. But I'd be lying if I said this was for everyone. The combat is still very similar to how it was in the original, and the camera, though improved, is still very janky and can cause multiple issues with avoiding enemies and obstacles. If you're a fan of the original, there is no doubt in my mind that you will find things to appreciate about this revisit to Gallowmere, even if you may take issue with a few of the changes or liberties made. For new players, though, approach this one with a little caution. You may still end up loving it for its creativity, as you should, but expect some dated issues to make their way through as well. Either way, we hopes it goes well. And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have you played this remake or the original before yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, as I'm sure these are going to be all over the place. And if you're feeling generous, please consider supporting my Patreon, where awesome people like Brandon, CLO, and Jedi Dude all help to keep this channel going. Happy Halloween, my friends. Until next time.